Well, welcome to day 4 and the final day of the CentreCourt MBA Festival. It's a pleasure to have so many of you with us, not just on the Zoom platform where you'll be able to ask your questions of our great panelists today, but also all of you that are following on the homepage of Poets and Quants, and of course all of those that will be catching this and other recordings on the Facebook and YouTube channels for Poets and Quants. Since we've been starting the CentreCourt Festival 4 weeks ago, I think we've had over 1 million views of the different panels. No pressure on our panelists today, of course, with those sort of numbers. And I'm delighted to welcome Donna Clark. Donna is the Executive Director of Admissions from the Darden School. Donna,
Hi,
lovely
everyone.
to see you again. I hope that you're enjoying life with that. It's good to see you too. I hope you're enjoying life with that little puppy of yours.
Oh, he's sleeping right now. Fortunately, I ran him around before the webinar so he wouldn't interrupt us.
Because we thought that was a good way to get 1 million views. You know, if you had a puppy in your
Okay,
arms.
well, I can always wake him up at the end, Matt. I'm happy to wake him up.
Also
good
joining
morning,
us,
everybody. Hey, there's Matt.
There he is. I hear that voice from California. How are you, John?
Okay, I see you now have a connection.
We do. I'm now a presenter rather than an attendee. So it's my great pleasure to present to everybody Kathleen Edwards, who is the director of MBA admissions from the Goizeta School at Emory. Kathleen, great to have you with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Janice Kennedy, who's the executive director of recruiting admissions at Rice in Houston. Janice, you're well, I hope.
I am. Thank you.
Great. So my first question is just either a big question or a big statement. Isn't this a great time to go to business school with all of the uncertainty that's out there and the different conditions that people face with the pandemic and everything else? Donna, great time to go to business school now?
I absolutely agree, and I have been particularly thinking about it not only with regard to COVID, but with regard to recent, racial injustices that continue to happen. And I was just thinking about it literally this morning in the shower, how desperately we need strong leaders. I'm sure that all of our business schools do so much. I know I'm really proud of what Darden does in terms of training leaders to lead diverse and inclusive organizations. And not only do we need strong leaders because of COVID, but because of these types of racial issues and issues in society like water shortages. I mean, business can be such a facilitator of significant change. And I totally agree with you, Matt. This is a wonderful time especially for people who are predisposed to have leadership skills or want to cultivate their leadership skills and make a difference.
Right. Now we'll be looking at the how and when and deadlines, whether it's for this fall, for January in the case of Darden, or next year. But turning to Kathleen, perhaps a similar sense that with everything that's going on, business school is a great chance to build those leadership skills, other skill sets, and emerge a couple of years from now with all sorts of opportunities.
Absolutely. I think, like Donna was saying, certainly facing a crisis whether it's economic, healthcare, all of the impacts that kind of go across industries and across functions as well, that being able to adapt to new situations, but also understanding how to work together as a team, how to pivot quickly, really are all these kinds of skills that we talk about in business school, and you get to put into practice in a school situation. And now a combination of school and real life is all happening at once. And also conversation, how to facilitate conversations, whether it's tough questions. I think COVID has brought up a lot of tough questions about the socioeconomic and racial divide as well. And then adding on top of that, the current situation with George Floyd and so when you have a group of people who are motivated to improve themselves, challenge themselves, and have tough conversations, that's a great place to be. And so we're seeing the students come together to have difficult conversations about how to be actively anti-racist and anti-racism, and how does that translate into an organization and communicating across an organization as well. So, so yes, I think the students who are in school right now and are starting school in the next year or so will be graduating primed and ready to lead through the next crisis or continual change and change management. Absolutely.
Right. Well, a call out to one of the alumni that we interviewed for for this event. I spoke with one of the Goizeta graduates, Jasmine, who herself had been working pre-Goizeta on providing opportunities for disenfranchised youth, and obviously that fed into her work and the career that she's gone on to develop now. She's a great case study in those sort of qualities that you're describing. And Janice, this idea of inclusion, this idea of agility, resilience, all of these skill sets that will be so valuable, whether in the job market of 2020 or beyond, that's at the heart of the experience at Rice.
Not only that, but I think about the real-time ambiguity and how important it is to capture that, live in that, learn in that, and grow. Your resilience and your agility. I mean, these are the things that are going to be critical both in business and in life as we try to find, everyone says, the new normal. So what a perfect time to real-time learn it and live it. Some of the best leaders I've worked with were the ones who could really make strong, good decisions with ambiguity. And that's the hardest part to learn sometimes.
Right. Now, that ambiguity has brought all sorts of different circumstances, whether it's for US domestic applicants who until as recently as a month ago, perhaps thought that things were fairly solid. They now find themselves furloughed or very uncertain conditions in many industries. Perhaps each of you in turn could talk us through what you have done as schools. You've already looked to extend deadlines for those that feel that right now would be the right time to apply, and also what you're then anticipating in terms of welcoming the class, both for campus-based or blended learning as you adapt to the current situation. Then I'll ask you to look into that crystal ball and we'll talk about admissions for next year. But Donna, you extended deadlines to the middle of July, and have also looked at opening new programs. So talk us through those different options.
Sure. We extended our typical April 6th round 3 deadline until July 15th, anticipating that there were probably going to be implications from COVID that we were not aware of at the time. So for example, there is a lot of discussion as to whether OPT and CPT will be compromised and what implication that will have on our international students. Really happy with the quality and volume of applications we've seen in round 3. Round 3 is typically not a high volume round in terms of offers of admission, but we have made approximately 65 offers of admission to really strong round 3 candidates. And to your point about other options, we are next year launching a January start in response to COVID. And it's primarily because so many of the embassies and consulates around the world are closed. There's a lot of questions about whether international students will be able to get their visas in time. And so Darden, I very innovatively opened up a January option in hopes of being able to accommodate students who will not be in a position to start in August.
Right. So those that are still looking to apply, you've had those 65 and some very, very strong candidates in this final round, but still options to take GMAT or GRE tests, put everything together. Would you encourage people to target the January option, given the way that the class is now filling?
Well, I mean, the nice thing about the January option for domestic students and international students is that it shortens the opportunity cost. So typically our MBA program takes 21 months to complete, and with the January option, one can condense their MBA into 17 months. It will be more intense. Classes will meet every day, and they're still working out the details. We expect that we'll probably have 4 or 5 sections in August and 1 or 2 in January. I think it'll be very appealing to international students who may need more time to get their visa. one of the issues that many international students are facing is that lenders won't give them their money for tuition unless they're residing in the United States. So in some cases they can get 80% of it, but they're short the 20%. And so love the creativity of the January option. It's a lot of work on the part of the faculty to have 2 starts and to figure out how to condense it into 17 months. But our faculty are, really committed to making that a great experience for international students. We have a meeting today to talk about how to fill August versus January. We've sent out a survey to see who's interested in August and who's interested in January. We may take some students from round 3 or the wait list and admit them for January only, to be determined. But I'm very excited that we have 2 options for our students. And again, a lot of people have been concerned about the opportunity cost of an MBA, so cutting it down by 4 months is really valuable.
Right. Now, I suppose that's something that Goizeda had been looking at, and even this option of the 1-year MBA. I think you had a class start, it was last month in May, Kathleen, as well as the regular class. So you've just welcomed this group, perhaps virtually for the time being. Looking ahead for deadlines, what are the deadlines still available to those hoping to start at Goizeda in the fall?
Sure. We and as soon as the COVID situation arose, we decided to extend the 2-year deadline to July 1st, and also waive the application fee just to remove some of the barriers, things like that. And we haven't waived the test requirement, but we have expanded our waiver review possibilities, so students can apply without a test and be reviewed for a waiver during that process. So, and we did that as well before the 1-year program started in early May. We pushed it back a tiny bit, and then are delivering it virtually right now. But we're able to have some students who otherwise would not have been considering full-time programs, who maybe were facing furloughs, things like that, jumped on the opportunity. So we have a very strong 1-year class going on right now. And then similar kinds of situations for people who were planning ahead for 2021 and have decided to accelerate and apply for 2020, or either for unfortunate situations or just because they are excited about the opportunity and, like we were talking about, want to be in school during this unusual time and be graduating hopefully in a recovery period. But yes, so I think we have seen an increase in a variety of kinds of applicants, people who maybe hadn't thought about applying at this point or applying to a full-time program versus a part-time program, but very strong candidates. And we've been able to adjust our process to review without a test score necessarily, or make those kinds of assessments with as much information as provided by the candidates, with or without a test score.
Right, thank you. And Janice, for starting at Rice in the fall, both in terms of deadlines, but also perhaps to pick up on Kathleen's point of, there's some people that are thinking about going to business school for 12, 18, 24 months. There's a long sort of runway before they send in their applications, but they're finding themselves in very different circumstances now and trying to pull things together very quickly. Maybe just reassuring them also, how you understand those challenging circumstances. They may not have had as much time as others to put together the elements of the application with the same time and thought.
Yeah, it is, because everything's changing, and therefore people are making their changes to their decisions and their plans. So we certainly respect and understand that. We are allowing test exceptions. So if people apply, just as they apply, don't have a test, we review it for an exception. It doesn't always get that, but I would rather someone have a good shot at getting in than accepting everyone and then it ends up in the admissions decision. So I think it's the right thing to do. We also, I think we're putting it on maybe this Friday, how to apply in 10 days. So we think that it can be done. It's very task driven and what you do each day, because our deadline, internationals was June 1st, and our deadline for domestic is June 15th. So we're trying to help everybody who's making those late-breaking decisions come in just as strong as everyone else.
Right. Now, of course, the GMAT and the GRE, you talk about waivers, that's been part of an assessment of applicants for decades now, and provides a demonstration of some of the quant skills that they'll need in the program and other critical reasoning skills. Are there other good ways, Janice, for an applicant, in the absence of one of those test scores, to show to you that they can handle discounted cash flow and everything else that you're going to throw at them?
Yeah, we've suggested that they talk about it in the optional essay. Just give us what you can. We've asked for other certifications or licenses or tests that you've taken that show that level. I mean, we've gotten LSATs and MCATs and, all the different types of tests. Show us how you can, or speak to your degree plan and what you've done. What I'm really impressed by is many of the applicants are also taking a class or a Coursera course to hone that skill, even if it's been a while. So I think people are doing the right thing. We've gotten a lot of impressive applications in.
So, there we are talking about the agility and the resilience of the candidates, but you as schools are showing, similar levels of creativity, removing some of those barriers, trying to get things done in 10 days. Do you think that we might see the end of standardized tests as part of this process? I mean, Donna, you've looked at GMAT and GRE scores for many years. Do you think that this might be opening the door to other ways to demonstrate the skill sets that really matter to you?
Hope so. We piloted a program in our round 3 application deadline this year that enabled people. At the time we made this decision, let me back up, GMAT and GRE test centers were closed. And we wanted to be able to accommodate round 3 applicants who were not able to take the GMAT or GRE. And so we, for the first time, piloted a program in which applicants were allowed, if they had a GMAT or GRE from previous test administrations, they could submit it, of course, but we also allowed them to submit their SAT or ACT score. And we took into consideration other evidence that they can do the work academically. So I think going forward, I look at it as we are going to broaden our admissions criteria. It is 2020. And there are ways and certifications to demonstrate your academic strengths outside of a standardized test. I personally, I feel very strongly that there's been too much emphasis placed on these tests, and people should have choices. So for example, if an applicant is trying to demonstrate leadership, there are a multitude of ways that they can demonstrate leadership skills through the workplace, through the recommendations, through community service, through undergraduate. Perhaps they have another master's degree and they were really involved. They may have made an impact in some way, and there are multiple ways to show that you have leadership potential. Same with work experience. An applicant has multiple ways to demonstrate that they've made an impact at work. It goes on and on. But when it comes to academics, historically, we look so much at GMAT, GRE, and undergraduate performance, and I find that to be extremely limited. So for example, applicants may have a CPA or CFA. Perhaps they completed HBX online. Maybe they work in a very quantitative oriented job. Maybe their recommenders can talk about their quantitative aptitude. So I know for us at Darden, we are broadening the way that we're looking at how one can prove academic preparedness. It is incumbent upon the applicant to do that. And if they don't have a lot of other evidence, I would recommend taking the GMAT or GRE. But if they do have a lot of other evidence, there are new ways to show, that you can do the work. We're also really fortunate at Darden. We have a very strong enterprise analytics team, and they did some research on the pilot that we introduced in round 3 and looked at the correlation between the SAT and the GMAT. And it was surprisingly very well correlated, enough to give us confidence to continue that pilot. So I'm excited. I think it fits with the times, and there are so many online programs and Coursera programs and certifications that enable an applicant to prove that they can excel academically in an MBA program.
Right. Kathleen, I'm sure that you've read one of those optional essays, and the applicant explains that, standardized tests, it's not their thing. And you're looking at this profile where in the 4 or 5 years since they graduated from college, they've enjoyed this, fast track career development, the levels of responsibility. Now, as you're weighing those two up, and even perhaps as we think about those considering taking the GMAT or GRE at home and the impact of that, again, perhaps you can put those two tests in context of, what you really love to see in an applicant.
Sure. I mean, I think, we all talk about a holistic review of the application, and it is true. We're reviewing academic information as much as possible, and the test is that kind of standardized piece, but we've also always known that the test is not the end-all be-all, and there are certainly different backgrounds and preparedness. So we've always looked at all the components of the application. So certainly have read many optional essays where I'm just not a good test taker, things like that. And so it is exciting to think about different ways for students to demonstrate their readiness for our programs and their demonstrate success in other ways in the past, and how that is probably past success is the most useful predictor for future success, as we know. But really also in a small program like ours, we're able to think about beyond just the academic or numerical score. It's how they're contributing to the community, how they adapt and face challenges, resiliency, like we talked about, all those different things that make a great MBA student beyond just a test score. So it is exciting to think about the opening up of the processes, and something that's already been explored in other venues for the MBA beyond the full-time. So I think as we think about candidates and how they can demonstrate to us that they are ready for this rigor of our programs, and what that looks like in terms of is it taking courses, is it demonstrating through grades, or supplementing their maybe previous academic record with a test score, if that is a way for them to shore up their maybe a perceived weakness in other areas. So the test score is something that is kind of a double-edged sword, absolutely, especially when you think about rankings and things like that. So we are using this period as a way to consider different opportunities in that process, but also so much exciting opportunities about the way we interact with prospects and students over virtual tools, things like that. So a lot of different aspects are really forcing outside external forces are making us examine different opportunities, which is always exciting.
Right, every challenge brings opportunity. Janice, if we draw back the curtains on your admissions team, and of course you have a very beautiful campus at Rice, I'm sure you have very beautiful curtains as well. There's a point where you've all been reading individual files, and presumably as a committee or as that team, you come together and then start to discuss, well, we really liked this aspect of this applicant. And do you sometimes just have this faith, there's something that you see in an applicant that's beyond test scores, there's some intrinsic value that you see to them and say, this is someone that we want here in our program?
It's interesting to me that you can truly see authenticity in an application. And it's so much easier to see a person's value when they're authentic. So I think when we feel like we're getting to know them, and we don't need to know everything, but when we feel like we're getting to know their journey, their experience, their aspirations, their attitude, those are the things those that add value. So I've always said, just be authentic, be you, and you will be at the school you are meant to be at.
Right. Now, looking into that crystal ball, Janice, I mean, as all the admissions field, I think we're all exhausted. This has been, one of the longest years. Your summer plans have been put on hold. You're still bringing in the class for the fall before we get to next year. And, John on Poets was predicting, what could be a record-breaking year in application volume. Is that something, Janice, that you think we're likely to see, that applications next year will see a big jump upwards?
Well, we've already experienced that trend. So it's been, we hit a record for this year, which is fantastic. So if that states that it's coming, I think the trend has begun. So we're excited that people are looking at the opportunity, looking at it differently, looking at themselves, investing in themselves and their careers. So I think the pace will continue. I hope that the numbers will continue, and I'm excited for what everyone will get both in the school and outside of the school.
Right, and Donna, you talked about a record round 3, which is certainly building volume for the incoming class. Where do you see numbers heading next year? And even if you break down, is it sort of driven by the US domestic market, or do you think that the international market is going to pick up again?
Good question. GMAC has a really great chart that shows, I think, about 40 years of what happens with applications when there's a recession, and repeatedly applications to business school tend to go up when there is a recession. And so I think most of us in the industry are expecting an upturn next year in applications. I think a lot will depend on what happens with sort of OPT and CPT and borders closing, and the Trump administration and how welcoming they are to international students. I mean, we're all waiting very anxiously to see what final decisions are made with regard to OPT. That's making us very nervous right now. But hopefully it'll be a temporary situation, and things will be easier for international students the following year. But we're a little bit in a holding pattern. I do think domestic applications will definitely increase.
Right. I mean, Kathleen, we've gone from one of the strongest US job markets on record to now a record 40 million unemployed. Not all of them, of course, considering business school, but still there's been this dramatic shift over such a short period of time. Do you think that will release sort of a pent-up demand from US applicants? And then, as Donna said, we're in a presidential year. We'll see how things play out internationally.
I am very curious to see. I know there's been a lot of conversation and certainly valid points or indicators pointing towards a significant increase in applications, but I also think there are so many other factors that are happening. The situation is changing week to week and month to month, that certainly there's been a shifting of applications to this summer that, you know, maybe would have been in the fall, but I'm not sure that there will be a huge rise in the way that some are predicting, if the other situations, particularly as Donna mentioned, the international situations don't facilitate that, or make it still too risky, or just not even possible for international students to come to the US. But I think in terms of job market and recovery, hopefully those indicators do send, when things are going down, we kind of joke in the admissions world, it's just a joke, but kind of hoping for a mini recession occasionally. This is not what we asked for, but certainly it can show benefits in terms of the numbers of people applying to business school for that additional skill training, of course, but also a time to invest in oneself and take a break from maybe a volatile period, or avoid a break in a resume, certainly. But any time is a good time to go to business school, but certainly any time with a volatile market is a great time to go to business school.
Right. Now, Janice, whether the increase is 5%, 25%, 55%, your teams will be ready, I'm sure. But of course, we need to sort of abstract that volume and critical mass of other applicants, because really it's about you as the individual, as the applicant, your story. I mean, you talked about authenticity. So perhaps now, as we take a shift to all of those looking at applying to business school in the next 12 months, maybe what your key advice would be to anybody that's maybe thinking, this year there are going to be so many other applicants, how do I stand out? What would you really have them focus on as they sit down and thoughtfully put together their application?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what's going to be important is knowing where you want to go. You will get a fantastic MBA in so many schools. So how do you determine the right place for you? And it's beyond researching the web. I mean, there's so much access to all of us now virtually to find out what is the engagement like? What is the actual experience of getting that MBA? To the degree you understand that and you weave that into your story and into your aspiration and into your plan, it stands out as a fit for the school. And everyone will find their fit if they do that work, in my opinion. But I think if it's just apply everywhere and see what happens, I don't think you've brought yourself forward in an integrated way to what the school is. So that's just my take. Know what it's about and tell the story of how you will fit into that journey and the specificity of that university.
Right. And yeah, really making it about the school. Perhaps if people are working remotely at the moment, it's an opportunity to get to know you better, take some of that time. Kathleen was mentioning some of the innovative things that you're doing virtually. So if I want to get, to really connect with Rice, what would you recommend? What are some of the options if a campus visit isn't available right now?
Well, we did a virtual campus visit. Everything's virtual. So we have put on more events that are either specific to a subject or to a demographic or to a type of student or to a struggle. So we have had more events than I personally thought we could put together. My team is exhausted. They're fabulous. I'm so grateful for them. But what we're trying to do is get those micro conversations going beyond just an information session that says, if you're in this spot, let's talk. So I think on all of our websites, you can find many opportunities to dig deeper virtually with each university.
Right. Donna, connecting with whether it's Darden students and alum, I mean, we can see the campus behind you on the Zoom background image that you've chosen, so there's a place to start. But just really finding out about that sort of DNA of Darden and the personality, what would you recommend?
Well, I really like what Janice said earlier about connecting with applicants on a micro level. We are offering opportunities to have MBA conversations one-on-one with a member of our team. And that's really time consuming, more so than an info session when you can talk to maybe 100 people at a time or more. But I love doing them because you can really connect individually with a person and hear their story and their specific questions and guide them through the process in a customized way. So we are really amplifying the MBA one-on-one conversations. We're also offering, a virtual tour, virtual classroom visits to be rolled out. Lots of participation in events like this, the MBA tour, all around the world. But I'm most excited about the individual MBA conversations because most people are in admissions because they love connecting with prospective students, and there's just nothing more valuable than connecting one-on-one and giving them specific advice. The other thing that I would say, you had asked an earlier question, and I also like what Janice said about the program they're offering called How to Apply in 10 Days. One of the things that I often tell prospective students who find the process understandably to be very daunting is that the majority of work is behind you. People have, for the most part, most of them have attended college and they were involved in college and hopefully performed well and made the most of their experience, and they've established their careers, and maybe they've been in with 1, 2, or 3 organizations and have an upward trajectory, and they've established relationships with people who can write recommendations on their behalf, and many of them have earned certification programs that will work in their favor. So when it actually comes down to applying, I often remind people, you're documenting what has already been done or is in process. And I think that helps take the edge off. It takes years really to prepare for business school, and most of the candidates have already accomplished so much. It's just a matter of prioritizing, what stories they want to tell and what themes they want to get across and how they want to approach an interview. But the hard work is behind them. So I love that idea of how to apply in 10 days, because I think that is really doable.
Right. So whether it's 10 days or today, June 2nd, it's 100 days to the round 1 deadline of a little known school up in Boston. I forget its name. But we're looking at that sort of 3.5 month window now to round 1. Kathleen, with both Janice's comments and Donna's about the work that people have already done, bringing that together, prioritizing. What advice would you share to help people prioritize? Because they'll be looking back at 4 years of college, perhaps the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years of professional experience. How can you help them sort of identify what really they would do well to share with you as an admissions office?
Well, yeah, I think to their point that they've done all this work, so really it's about distilling that into a message that communicates the value that they will bring to our classroom community, our student community, and how it connects to their future goals. So that's really the kind of pivotal point of the application, is where you're coming from, what you bring with you, and how it helps you get where you're going, how we can partner with you as a school to help you achieve your goals. So by reviewing your own career story, and even maybe looking back with some 2020 vision on how you made those career decisions, whether it was which job you accepted or which things promotions you qualified for, or projects you volunteered for, the experiences you've gained, and then using that as a jumping off point for where you want to go next, and really how to connect those dots for us. So because that's really what we need to know. And we were talking a little bit about, the three of us have different backgrounds, two education, one corporate, and I have a primarily educational background. And one of the things I really truly enjoy about what we do is that I get to meet people who have done all of these jobs and know so much about so many things that I will never firsthand experience, but I get to learn from them through their applications, through their interviews. I feel smarter when I walk out of an interview. That's how I should feel. I should have learned a little bit about what you know and what you've done in your career so far. But I can't answer the question of what should you do next. I can guide you and certainly assess whether your critical thinking is there and whether you've done the correct research, but we can't do that for you. So this time is, I think the priority, if you haven't already, is doing that research into where you want to go next. Like we said, we're all stuck at home. We're all kind of in our pajamas. This is a great time to do an informational Zoom call with someone who's in a position or a field that you're interested in, maybe using your own undergraduate alumni network to activate that and to reach out to people. Or through the networks of the school, like we talked about, it's absolutely important to connect with alumni and students of the schools you're interested in attending, but also do the pre-work, do the groundwork before those conversations, so that you have at least a little bit of that elevator pitch ready to go for why you want to go to business school, how it will help you attain your future career goals. So I think that's kind of the top priority, and then look at the application process and how that can help you get there. I always recommend that people look at the essay questions, start thinking about those, because those are simple questions, but they are absolutely what we want to know. So be thinking about how you can answer those effectively through your research, through your process of putting that application together starting now.
Right. I think even in a digital age, keeping a notepad and pencil by your bed with those questions in your head, suddenly you might have some great idea, or something that is part of that authenticity to share. Now, Janice, one of our viewers, Nassif, he's followed all 4 days of CentreCourt and has reminded me that, of course, my favorite question to all of you in the admissions is, when you look at somebody's resume, do you start at the top or do you start at the bottom? So obviously, I'd love to reposition that question, but also, a resume, typically we've put it together with a view to applying for jobs. It might have some very technical skills. There's a story embedded in there. So perhaps talk us through the resume and either the pitfalls that we might make, or the story that you would like to see us share through that piece of paper.
I'm one that starts at the bottom. I like to follow the journey. I like to put the pieces together and end up with a picture of the individual through their career journey, past school, what have you. I spent all my career in the corporate environment, so I have lived in resumes for a long time, and that's one of the cool things that is very similar here. But I know a lot of the roles and the things that people are saying. I think the most important work is to quantify your impact on whatever role. You do not have to be the person with authority to impact a company. So show your leadership, show your impact, quantify it. Don't tell us the tactics of what you do. Tell us who you are in that environment and the impact you have for that company and the company's had for you. That tells us the story of your journey. And so I don't think resumes need to be 4 pages. I think you can say a lot and leave us hungry for more. Because sometimes when they're too long, I'm like, okay, chapter book. I really just want to create that vision of the journey.
Right. Now, of course, whether you do start at the bottom or up at the top, Donna, that resume is then supported by the voices of recommenders. You've gone from the bullet points that may provide some of that detail and quantify those accomplishments, and now these voices. But it's not simply patting you on the back and saying, oh, Donna's a great person, member of our team. This really is an opportunity for those individuals with a very close substantive relationship to share some very helpful insights with you as an admissions office.
Right. I really love when recommenders use anecdotes or vignettes to illustrate a point. So there's a big difference between saying Matt is a real team player versus telling a story that illustrates the extent to which you're a team player. And sometimes those vignettes and anecdotes will really stand out in your mind. I can't tell you how many times we're in admissions committee and somebody will come in and tell a story that they read in an application or that they heard in an interview that illustrated the point they were trying to make. So I'm a big fan of the effectiveness of stories, vignettes, and anecdotes, as opposed to broad sweeping statements like, Matt is a strong leader or Matt is a team player. That's kind of gonna maybe not register to the same palpable way that hearing a story about how you went the 11th mile to help, another team that you're not on, really helped move a project forward.
Right, and given that you receive applications from all over the world, the language that an American recommender might use and would typically be comfortable with, if you compare to a fairly dour Norwegian recommender who begrudgingly says, well, Donna's quite good, which in Norwegian terms means that you're off the charts, you're able to contextualize those voices. So applicants shouldn't be worried about the writing skills of their recommenders. What if English is not their mother tongue?
Oh, Matt, are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So usually if English is not their mother tongue, applicant will have their recommendation transcribed, or they'll get a translator to translate it, and that is not uncommon. I mean, one of the beauties of admissions is, as Kathleen stated so well, is that we meet people every day, and I look at it less as a judgmental role and more on one where I get the opportunity to be inspired every day. I love reading applications and hearing their stories. We have a really experienced staff at Darden who's been at it for a long time and has traveled around the world and knows the educational systems around the world and some of the cultural mores around the world. So it's one of the benefits of the breadth of experience we get to have. So I would not worry about that. To Janice's point, you have to be authentic. And if you're from Norway and you've worked in Norway and your recommenders are Norwegian, that's what you need to go with. And I've been to Norway. I'm not an expert on Norway, but I know a little bit about it. And some of us have really deep international knowledge in some of the bigger regions of the world where we get a lot of applicants.
Right, so trust you, the schools, with your experience with applicants, applying, and presumably you could always ask one of your current students for any sort of insights about a local culture if you needed it, right? They're a great resource to all of you. So Kathleen, we've had the resume and those accomplishments. We've now got the insights and voices of the recommenders. I mean, you said earlier, we choose the essays for a reason and what we then want to discover. But with what you've already captured, perhaps an applicant should be mindful to avoid any needless redundancy. You've got great details from the resume, you've got these voices of recommenders, and to make sure that what they then share in the essays is a compliment, but doesn't need to go back to each of the bullet points of their resume.
Mm-hmm. Correct, yes. And so I think all the schools are very deliberate about how we shape the essay questions, how they're worded, and then I think, and I can speak for Rosetta specifically, that we're very deliberate about the word limits on the essays to help students avoid that pitfall of feeling that they need to over-explain or that they're applying to a creative language writing program. We're a business school. It's about effective, efficient communication, direct communication. We're looking for the meat within the answer as opposed to beautiful poetry, flowery language. But essentially, we're looking for the answer to the question. We're looking for tangible examples and that we've learned something more about you from your answers. So whether it's your personality, whether it's your workplace personality, how you've handled challenges, how you feel you've added value to your organization. I think as we review an application, we're looking for corroborating evidence across the whole piece. So if you say you're a hard worker, we're going to hope that your recommenders are assuming or reiterating that, but true, it doesn't need to get repetitive. You don't need to restate the same kinds of things that you've asked, that you've given some talking points to your recommenders or told them why you're excited about business school. you can cover a different aspect in your application. And then of course, if there's something important for the committee to know that we don't ask directly, that's where you can use the optional essay. If there's a situation that you feel deserves context or requires context for the committee to better understand, that's how you can use the optional essay to add that information.
Now, by the time you've looked at all of these different elements, then as a committee, you're making a decision about who to invite for interview. And, you're still interviewing, I guess, for the incoming fall class before we even think about next year. Janice, if you could either sort of, put your hand on the arm of the person and say, it's okay, breathe. That they're eager, they want to shine at this point. So what advice would you give them to make sure that, the very natural, enthusiastic them comes across in the interview?
Yes. Don't pretend, back to authenticity. The one thing is we typically, our interviews are done by current students, but now that we have extended our deadlines, our current students, they're done, many of them. So some of the staff is picking up the interviews. And so we're trying to serve that role because we believe that interview is two-way. It's also for the candidate to understand and hear more and connect with the school. But to the degree that you're open and authentic and it's going to be a better interview. I mean, watch your time, all those things that we all know. Have your elevator pitch down, share who you are. I think the most important thing is the connection and the story you tell, because we've already read it. I mean, so it's just put it all together with your personality.
Right, and that authenticity that will then emerge and shine through. We started sort of looking at next year and what will perhaps be some record volumes of applications. And again, people can get lost in the numbers and think, well, I'm competing with thousands of other individuals. It's one story. I mean, Donna, just in terms of, do you look at individuals based on their demographics? Are you comparing consultants to consultants and software engineers to software engineers? You're looking for diversity in the classroom. So, we're not competing with everyone else that's applying to Darden this year.
Right. Darden is a general management program that is based on the case method, and there's a heavy emphasis on class participation and wanting people from different backgrounds. That being said, there are a lot of consultants, accountants, investment bankers. We need those sort of people with bread and butter, business experience. On the other end of the spectrum, we have some people from the Peace Corps and nonprofits, and we have 9 dual degree programs. So oftentimes it attracts nurses or doctors or people who are exploring an MBA, JD, or interest in public health or public affairs. So love that there's lots of different voices. We do not bucket the way we're reading according to industry. It's not like I read a screen that's all consultants. Or all investment bankers. We read by round in the order in which they're received and go through the process. And then related to your previous question about what advice I would give people, as you were asking Janice that question, for early career applicants, I will pass on some advice that I heard at UNC graduation. I started my career at UNC Chapel Hill, and one of the graduation speakers was the CEO of Sara Lee. And one of the things he said was, just go out there every day and do the best job you can, and your future is going to fall into place. And that really resonated with me at the time, because I do think if you go out there and do your best on a daily basis, that just accumulates, and there are lots of opportunities that are going to open up, not just business school. So for early career people, I just want to pass on that advice. A great applicant will come out of that type of attitude and effort.
Yeah. Now, if I can bring this hour of insight, I mean, I feel so fortunate to be able to spend an hour just picking your brains, hearing your insights. I'd like to bring it back to where we began 60 minutes ago. We were talking about, certain the lack of dialogue right now in society, the need for leadership, this sense of inclusion. And perhaps each of you, as you think about whether it's minorities applying to business school, gender balance in the MBA classroom, there are many people that will say, is business school for me? Yes, there are lots of consultants and bankers and software engineers, but perhaps just a word from each of you of how you would then sort of address and say, whatever your background, whatever experience that you bring, why you might want to consider business school in your future, the sense of inclusion. Kathleen, can I start with you?
Sure, absolutely. I think when I think about Quizweta specifically, obviously I'm a little biased. I'm also an alumna of our program. So what always springs to mind is the most important thing about my experience personally, and then the experiences of the students that I see every day, is the commitment that everyone has to our community and to being at Quizweta. So they have chosen to be part of this school experience, part of this educational experience. And that doesn't mean that they're all exactly the same. And in fact, it means they have a lot of different kinds of experiences, opinions, but they all are critical thinkers. They're all striving for improvement. And that's the common thread that brings people together, that they are joining a group that is willing to have open conversations and not necessarily agree all the time, but to discuss options, to come together as a group, and everyone is heard and everyone can feel safe and share their voice. So in that sense, I think it truly is a place to be able to grow and develop and expand your perspective, see different viewpoints, and your mind may not be changed necessarily. That's not necessarily the goal, but you'll understand how you got to your opinion and how to work with other people with different opinions and for the better good. So whether it's the better good of an organization, an individual team, or a company, or a startup, or a society, really, and how society and business can work together to adapt to changes and improve quality of life for not just an individual investor, but the whole organization and all those people affected by the organization. So it's a bit of a rambling answer, but that's what I think makes the business school community special, and certainly my own. I'm biased, but coming in and that word bias is a great thing to kind of bring up, because that's what we're all open to examining. And I think by opting into a business school experience, wherever that is, you are saying, I am open to acknowledging my room for improvement, acknowledging that there are other opinions and other perspectives and best practices. How can I learn from them? How can I improve and be an effective leader and decision maker moving forward?
Right. Challenging bias, finding your voice. That's rambling. It's a great answer. Janice, what are your thoughts in terms of, is business school the place for me?
So one of the sayings that our Dean, Peter Rodriguez, always says is, your value is worth the size of the problem you can solve. So think about coming in with some really great functional expertise, or an expertise in a given area of anything. To the degree that you can see the bigger picture, and you can see a commercial organization, and you can have conversations with people who have an expertise that's completely different, you're set up to think differently. To the degree that you take that capability into life as well, your ability to see other aspects of a problem, hear other views, hear those biases, you will look at life differently. I'm not trying to make the MBA the end all be all, but if you do the work, both in an MBA and in life, it's transformative. And that's what we need.
Yeah. Donna, perhaps a last word from you, or from the CEO of Sarah Lee.
I would say business school may be appealing to people who want to make an impact. And sometimes in order to make a maximum impact, we need more skills. And the number of skills that one acquires in business schools, both functional skills, leadership skills, some of the skills that have already been mentioned by the other panelists, are so robust. And so I would just briefly say business school enables you to gain skills that perhaps you don't have right now in order to make a maximum impact. And you might not know what that impact is going to be on when you start business school. And it may help crystallize what that is while you're in business school, which is also really valuable.
Right. Well, whether you've been viewing this on Zoom, whether you've been on the Poets homepage, or you're watching this a week later on YouTube or Facebook, I think you'll agree with me. We've been spoiled with three wonderful panelists with the sort of insights and encouragement that they have shared, for you to explore. They've talked about meeting you on a micro level, on one-to-one, and the efforts that the admissions teams from Goizueta, from Darden, and from Rice are making to be able to talk with you about your stories and where business school might fit in for the year ahead. So thank you to my three wonderful panelists. A great way to start day 4. Stay safe. I think that you'll now be connecting directly with some of those that have been on this panel together. Thank you, all three of you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Great to see you.